Hello, I'm Aidan Magee. A huge welcome to you all. Talking of huge, I'm a huge QPR fan. I'm delighted to say I've been given the opportunity to review the 4-year plan, the most controversial and explosive film about football probably for the last 15-20 years. I'm delighted to say also that I'm joined by the producer and director Mat Hodgson. That's Matt with 2 T's, by the way. Or is it 1?
1 T.
It is 1 T. He's even got a broken arm, so that's what I call dedication. Matt, I've obviously had an advanced copy of the DVD. I've not seen anything like this since probably the early 90s when Graham Taylor and the Do I Not Like That documentary. Tell us a bit of background about it, because I was bowled over when I watched it.
There's probably several stories in football like this, but it's just getting the opportunity to actually make it. When these guys came in and bought the football club, I think everybody in the press, TV, film, everywhere knew that this was going to be a great story. Unfortunately, we got
You're absolutely right there. I was working for the News of the World at the time, and we didn't normally follow Premier League, but there was a bit of interest in this one.
You mean Championship?
Yeah, Championship. Yeah. No, we didn't normally cover the Championship, but there was definitely interest in.
Yeah, and probably that worked to my advantage in the end, because I doubt that a Premier League club would have let the cameras in so freely as they did with these guys being in the Championship. So that worked to my advantage, definitely.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes of footage here before we talk a bit more. Just let us know what you think.
The big one is cutting 2 million in salary for the player. I don't want somebody in the bank cost me $500,000. Simple as that.
Last 4 games, it's been horrible.
We play bad football, finito.
Dowie, sacked by QPR.
Last year we have much worse quality and we have much more points.
Lo scemo ci mette tutti contro, ci mette i tifosi veramente contro.
I want the name is booing me, or I said it well. You decide.
Ho fucilato Sosa.
We've got to go in there saying what won't happen to us.
Next year is our year.
We spent $3.5 million spread over 2 years. We've got 9 new players.
I think this is going to be a really good move for us, and so I'm quite excited about it.
I agree 100%. I mean, it's well done.
Gianni, this season when you sit here, we don't scream at the players. Be positive.
I think part of my plan was to let the focus be on the football, let our football do our talking for us.
You can't afford up and I don't up. Let's not our account.
The FA are investigating QPR, 7 charges, and it could mean that QPR will get points deducted.
Ogni volta che ci chiedo no problem, adesso siamo nella al gol.
The financial windfall is massive, 120, 150 million quid.
Sulla decisione un po' di cosa fare, o cosa vuoi fare per la Premier?
Now you know for this club, never.
Bumps along the way, but I think with all great things that happens.
An absolute basket case of a club. How did you get involved in this project, first of all?
I was actually doing some work with another company who had links with the Mittal family, and
how rich are they?
Very. Yeah, I don't think that's any secret. But lovely people as well at the same time. And then these guys came in, QPR came up in conversations, and like I say, I just sort of got down there with the cameras and got in there and saw an opportunity, really. It was never really signed off at the beginning as this is what we want to make and this is how it's going to look.
So it was embryonic and it developed?
Very embryonic, yeah. I mean, even to the point that I know that they came in and said we're going to do this in 4 years. I think at the beginning they thought, let's try and do it in a year and we'll get that on camera.
Is that because they thought they'd get to the Premier League much sooner than they actually did?
Well, I mean, you can't blame them for hoping for that, certainly. No. You know, ever the eternal optimist in football, we all are, yeah. So, so that first year kind of developed and nothing really happened, and I sort of tried to keep the project going because I knew that the footage I was getting was amazing. And I sort of laid down the challenge to them. I said, you know, if you've set out this 4-year plan, as it became, you know, evident it was, then let's follow it all the way through. And you know,
there's a hell of a commitment on your part, though, isn't it? I mean, you must have had to spend at least a couple of days a week there for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I mean,
you must have been sick of the sight of the place after a while.
No, not at all. I mean, I think you get your teeth into something and you get a little bit obsessive about it, and you know that you've got a good story. But I mean, from my point of view, there was obviously no guarantee that there was going to be the kind of the Hollywood ending at the end or the success. So yeah, that's kind of like high risk from my point of view.
So at what point did you actually walk in there? What month, what year? Was it 2007?
We got some footage in the very first year that was like of the desolate, as you just seen the shots, you know, the ground, the stadium, etc.
Taking down the badge. I mean, pardon the pun, but I was crestfallen when that happened, actually. But I mean, was there much fuss around things like that? The changing of the colour of the shorts and the mascot and all the rest of it?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I always knew I wanted to make a film that was purely observational. Whether I could do that was in question at first. So I sort of covered all angles. At first, I was editing with a guide voiceover, and I was interviewing fans as well. And a lot of the fans' reactions would always be, what have they done to our badge? What have they done to our short colour? You know, or the mascot, you know, and you sort of think, it's fair enough, to be fair. You know, these are things that are very important to the traditional fan.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, so you go in there and you surmount that initial obstacle of getting the owners on side. They seem to be quite complicit. What about the players? When you're going down into the dressing room, you're seeing them like half naked. Well, you're recording conversations. I mean, what do they think about it? I mean, were they just happy to pick up their money every week, or were they quite receptive?
You're talking about with regards to me and the camera?
Yeah, you and the camera and the players, yeah.
I didn't want to make a feature of the players anyway. So they were very sort of, they were like the foot soldiers to the generals, and the film was about the generals ultimately. Footballers, they stick together, as I'm sure you know, so they don't particularly like an outsider, and it's fair enough. I mean, you know, a guy swinging a camera around when you're trying to focus on your game, it wouldn't be everyone's idea of the you know, ideal preparation. So I was kind of, I was careful not to overstep my mark on that sense anyway, I think.
I have to say I was astonished by some of the things I saw in there. I mean, I was actually at the game, Birmingham away, in September 2008. I covered it for the News of the World. Martin Rowland's a respected player, a player I know. He's been there since 2003. He misses a chance. Briatore says, "We've got to sell this effing idiot." I mean, did any of that filter back to the players? Would this be the first time they'd have seen that side of Briatore, or the fact that he, you know, his opinion of the player?
I mean, as far as I'm aware, you know, I mean, everything I did, I just kept to myself, and everything I observed, I kept to myself. I'm sure that within the club there were, I mean, football works a lot on rumour and gossip within the four walls. So I'm sure within the club there were rumours of this, that, and the other going around. But certainly, I just kept quiet about what I'd seen and what I was capturing.
What surprised you most in that first year of filming?
The day Darry was sacked. That's when I really understood football very quickly.
When you say understood football, I mean, you mean it was much different to anything you'd experienced before?
Yeah, absolutely. My knowledge of football has always been just as a fan, just on the outside. And the day Darry got sacked was a very brutal day, I thought. And the way he took it was kind of matter of fact. So almost it affected like me more seeing it.
So he kind of expected it in a way.
Yeah, I think so. And
you in some ways probably hurt more than.
Yeah, because I wasn't used to that. That's how cutthroat football is on the inside, and I'd never witnessed that before. And he just took it on the chin, and he understands that that's how football works, as I'm sure many football people do on the inside. So I remember sort of feeling quite cold left cold by that day. You know, that it purely is a business. You know, at the end of the day.
And what point did you realise? Was that the point when you realised actually this plan is the road to nowhere? Because let's face it, you could have renamed this DVD "How Not to Run a Football Club," couldn't you?
well, they achieved it in the end, I guess. No, I mean, I think that the theory behind them getting rid of Dowie that early was that they still had time to rectify things within that season. That was like October '08, I think. I mean, if I'd have thought they were never going to do it, I wouldn't have carried on with the film, I don't think. So, I mean, there was one point, I think it was around the Paul Hart and Mick Harford
about
period.
January 2010, yeah.
Yeah, and they were fighting a relegation battle. I mean, that's, you know, when you're trying to make a film about success.
Well, it's about 2 months earlier, they've been banging in goals left, right and centre. I think they scored four in consecutive games.
Yeah.
He had the bust up with Akos Bouzaki at Watford in the dressing room, headbutt and everything. And then after that followed a real period of turbulence. But and they were embroiled in a relegation battle by about January, as you say.
Yeah, so from my point of view, you know, although it makes for great documentary again, although the doors were getting more and more closed at that point, understandably, because who wants that being captured at their football club when things are going so wrong? And like I say, it made great documentary, but where was the silver lining to all this at that point? So it was quite difficult to see your way through to the end. But then, luckily, you know, there was rumours about Neil coming in, and I think when Neil Warnock came in.
But there was a whole swathe of a period before that where there were, you know, even before 2010. I mean, they sacked Sosa. Sorry, I always felt knew the game, knew a lot more than the people who were running the club. Was possibly a little bit negative. In fact, he proved that subsequently at Swansea and Leicester, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it just seemed they weren't doing their diligence on the manager. If you want to, you know, Briatore's message comes across that he'd rather lose a game 4-3 than draw 0-0. If you want that kind of manager, you get Ossie Ardiles, don't you? You don't get Paul Hart, who's renowned for being a defensive coach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't sort of speak for their decisions. I guess that they were. It was a little bit shooting fish in a barrel at one point, but I suppose they were allowed to make their mistakes as well. You know, at least they didn't go down, and then they eventually turned it around in the end.
Did you experience any resistance from at any point? I mean, you know, with the tempers and the egos there, did you ever get a backlash from Briatore? You know, what are you doing here anyway?
It's interesting you say that. The one thing I kind of like about Flavio is that he tells it as it is, and from my point of view, there's this clarity then. So I always knew that if he didn't say anything or he didn't say hello even, it was great. It just meant I could carry on rolling. But there was one occasion when he just turned to me and he went, you know, do me a favour, get the F out of here. And I was not offended whatsoever. There was another occasion when I was just following him so intensely, I ended up in the toilet with him. So he told me in no uncertain terms to get out.
Well, you can tell us that just after this break. We're going to come back and talk more about the 4-year plan. Welcome back. I'm Aidan Magee. We've been discussing the 4-year plan, the most explosive, I think, documentary about football in the last possibly as much as 20 years. I'm with Mat Hodgson, the producer and director. Matt, we were just talking before then about how you followed Flavio Briatore into the toilet. You were really, that really is fly on the wall stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, like a limpet to these guys continually, match days in particular. Just wasn't aware of where I was walking with him too, unfortunately. So he turned around and told me to get out of there. But yeah, I mean that's just an indication of how tight I was to them at one point, and fair play to them as well for allowing me to be that tight to them as well.
I'll tell you what interested me during the filming. There's lots and lots of flashpoints, but as a kind of undercurrent, there were one or two sort of again flashpoints really of players speaking out and saying. I mean, there's Hogan in a frame saying, "Look, we've got no desire out on the pitch." Fitz Hall walks into the office in, I think it was about March 2009, and tells Palladini what he thinks of the fact that they've sent Dexter Blackstock, the top scorer, out on loan when they're kind of within, you know, spitting distance of the playoffs. I mean, did you more generally, did you pick up an undercurrent that the players were actually getting pretty fed up with this, especially when they realised that things are beginning to go spectacularly wrong?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. It wasn't a very pleasant place to be around at certain times down at the training ground. That's obviously I mean, the players are feeling that more than anyone else, to be honest.
Tell me more about that. I mean, what sort of things were you experiencing? How did the mood deteriorate?
I think you can get a vibe with team spirit quite easily about, you know, togetherness and perhaps a little bit of splintering going on. Not to say that there was any falling out amongst the players, not that I saw anyway. You could just tell it was a bit flat down at the training ground.
They were kind of on the road to nowhere. Is that the
maybe.
kind of, because I mean that's how I felt as a fan.
Yeah, maybe, and I think there was a lot of confusion as well at the time. I mean, you mentioned the part where Hogan of Frame speaks up. That was a meeting that was called by the board because they wanted some feedback by the fans, from the players, excuse me. So, I mean, fair play again to them for letting the players have a voice in that sense. But
only he seemed to be that forthcoming in the footage anyway.
In the cut, I mean, I would say he was the most passionate probably in that. Martin Rowland spoke up, Gavin Marn spoke up as well. But I think what Ephraim said was the tastiest of the meeting, certainly.
I suppose you had to just edit it down, I guess.
Yeah, you can't include everything, obviously.
What about, I mean, they brought in so many players. I'm thinking of De Carmine, Pellicore, Ledesma, players who anybody with any kind of football knowledge could see they were talented players, but they were never going to fit into a championship team at that juncture. You know, one that was trying to push for promotion in the middle of the league. I mean, how were those players received? I mean, do you think it's the same as at any club when a new signing came in, or was there an acceptance that these blokes were never going to cut it?
No, I wouldn't say that they were thought of as though they wouldn't cut it, but I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? You get offered a Real Madrid midfielder in Parejo, you get offered this talented Argentinian in Ledesma. But then it's tempting to take them, isn't it?
It is, but when you're foisting them on the manager, and a manager who knows the league, particularly someone like Dowie or Paul Hart, who'd worked in the Championship fairly recently, I mean, you know, I use the phrase on the road to nowhere. I mean, you're just creating divisions everywhere, it would seem.
Possibly. It's a different model as well, isn't it? I mean, with Italians in charge, they have a slightly different way of running a football club, and that's
tell us about that. I mean, is that go back to how it works in Serie A? They expect
for sure. Yeah, I mean that's seen as the norm out there. You know, a coach coaches. You know, given what the tools that he's given. I mean, I remember Briatore coming out with a quote saying, you know, I don't give my wallet to someone else to go and spend my money. You know, I spend my own money, and that's just the way that he saw it, rightly or wrongly. That's just the way that he saw sport management.
I just want to pick up on that actually, because he actually made a quote quite early on during the honeymoon period. He actually gave an interview with a magazine, and he said, "Why do I care about the opinion of somebody who turns up on a Saturday and pays £10?" He says that in the film. I think he raised that to £20 in the magazine interview. I mean, complete contempt for the supporters from what I could see. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I saw how much the fans care about the club firsthand and was astonished by it. You know, travelling up and down the motorway to Blackpool on a Tuesday night and seeing
3-0, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, I think it was.
I'm a bit sad.
But having seen that, yeah, obviously you can't treat. I mean, the fans are the customer, and then some, aren't they? So,
yeah. But they didn't seem to understand that, the owners. It was almost like a. See,
I think some of them did and some didn't. I think it would be the fair way of putting it. I don't know how that works out in Italy with the fans and if it's different, but certainly at a club, especially like QPR, which is very community-based, and it's a small club, so the fans probably mean a little bit more in that sense as well. You can't be saying things like that.
I remember covering Millwall maybe 10 years ago, and I used to wonder, Millwall were never going to be a successful Premier League club. They may get there for the season or so if things fall their way, but I used to wonder why Theo Paphitis, having earned so much money in previous businesses, would decide to take on an ailing company like Millwall, knowing that it would probably go not very far. I mean, and then it occurred to me, it opened up the door to Dragon's Den. He got a profile out of it, and that's what the fans felt at the time. It's just why these lot got involved. I mean, all right, Eccleston was pretty famous beforehand, but do you think that it was a big ego trip? They wanted to be better known?
It's possible. I mean, I think football ownership is a really interesting topic, and it's become more relevant over the last few years, which is why this film was so interesting to me. I mean, if you could own a football club, you probably would, wouldn't you? Let's face it.
I think it'd be fun. I think you'd lose a lot of money.
There is that, but
and you don't get much kind of. I mean, I think Alan Sugar was told when he was running Spurs. Someone said to him, "Don't go into it. You put everything in, you get so little back."
Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't make huge sense from a financial point of view, but certainly, like you say, from a profile point of view. But also, like, it's sport, and sport is it's a bit of a drug for some of these guys. You know, they've done very well in another sport, in Formula One.
Is this their kind of release? Is it their kind of guilty pleasure?
Maybe they thought that they could take a club from the Championship into the riches of the Premier League in a streamlined fashion that other people hadn't done. They could sort of succeed where other people hadn't. I don't think they did too badly on the expenditure front. Probably a few compensation packages.
Paying big wages, and also they kicked out a lot of managers.
Yeah, but I think everything's relative. So I don't think they were. I think they were like 12th in the wages league of the Championship.
Okay,
so that's kind of mid-table. Yeah, it's kind of moderate. But yeah, I mean, coming back to your point, it's an opportunity, isn't it, to do something different, to succeed in another field. These guys probably like that challenge, and also it made sense. QPR made sense. West London, it's sort of central.
I remember Palladini saying that to me. He said, do you know anyone who wants to buy this club? Nice club. It's near the West End.
Yeah.
You get a lovely game here if you get decent weather. And I'm thinking, is he really trying to sell this club? He doesn't have to sell it to me. I mean, there were no speculators. That's what we forget, I suppose. There weren't exactly loads of people throwing their hand in the ring saying, I'm desperate to own QPR.
Yeah, I mean, you were pretty close to the wall, I think, before these guys walked in. So, in that sense, it was good timing.
What about? I felt, and my members of my family have been going probably since the late 70s, early 80s. They associate certain things with QPR, and they felt that their club was being abused. The badge stripped away, the disenfranchisement with the supporters. What do you think about
that? That's probably something that a lot of football fans feel.
We heard them singing. At QPR specifically, we heard them singing, "We want our Rangers back." Yeah. I mean, that must have come from somewhere. I mean, to me, they were dragging the club through the mud just embarrassing the club all the time. I mean, am I speaking in too strong a term?
No, I mean, that's your opinion. I mean, what I observed, I think, were a lot of mistakes in the management of the club, for sure, and I could see that fans are going to feel that more than I would, because I'm not a QPR fan, but I can see that there were so many mistakes being made, and yeah, it became a bit of a laughing stock at one point. Definitely QPR did,
What about?
I mean, from my point of view, though, it was great, because it was just another sort of story in the soap opera.
So let me be clear. You're not a QPR fan like me. No. You don't bleed. You couldn't cut your wrist there and bleed blue and white.
Well, I would. It's a different blue and white. It's
okay,
Wednesday,
tell me more. Yeah, so you're Wednesday fan.
So I support Sheffield Wednesday, and we've gone through the mill as far as ownership is concerned over the last God knows how many years now. It all started with Dave Richards, obviously. So
yeah, I remember.
So I do completely empathise with QPR fans about how frustrating it is to have a club that you love.
I mean, yeah, it's not just QPR. Wednesday's been mismanaged. Notts County,
absolutely.
Portsmouth.
Yeah.
I mean, Portsmouth went from when 4 years ago this summer they won the FA Cup.
Yeah.
And now they're literally crawling on their knees. I mean, QPR didn't get anywhere near that bad, but it was just, as you say, a laughingstock.
Yeah, I mean, I read a book when I was starting this film called The Beautiful Game by David Cohn, who actually became an advisor on the film, and that was very much a catalyst for...
He's more of a financial...
Yeah, but I wanted to make a film that touched on the finance of football, because that's basically at the core of where all these clubs are going belly up, and it's, like you mentioned earlier, it's the fans who are going to be the ones that suffer. So, I felt it as a Wednesdayite, you feel it as a Rangers fan, and Coventry, all these other clubs are going through it as well at the same time.
So clubs who were competing quite well in the early years of the
and
the
it's amazing how many of those clubs that were in the Premier League when it started.
Southampton, Norwich. Well, Norwich have obviously come back,
Leeds,
but I mean they suffered.
Exactly.
Leeds, Manchester City went all the way down to the third tier.
Absolutely, and it's a worrying.
Charlton in the last few years.
Yeah, it's a really worrying trend for football, and I can't really see how it's going to get any better at the moment. So.
You came into contact with Fabio Capello just once or twice or briefly. Tell us about that experience.
He was at a couple of games as a guest of Flavio's, and he would always be in the hospitality areas. So that's where I was always, running around with my camera.
The C Club or the W12?
The C Club, the C Club. So there was one incident where I captured him on film, and he said something actually rather innocuous about the game being rather shameful because they just lost live on Sky to Leicester, and
2-1.
Yes,
Matthew Fry. Yeah, I think you actually show it in the film. Well,
we show the goals. Yeah.
Yeah, QPR were doing really well at that point, and that was the game where things started going wrong.
That was when it all started to go downhill a little bit. And there was one bite from Capello where he said that this game was shameful, and and that was it. But we decided
because
to take it out.
I mean, there were reports in the Daily Mail a few
well,
months
they were
back
inaccurate,
now.
unfortunately. But you know that happens.
Just to be clear, I mean, we were told that Capello was seen interfering with the club and the team selection and
choosing managers.
Choosing
more
managers.
More about the managers was the report. Yeah.
And that was wide of the mark.
That was wide of the mark. But never mind. This was way before the film had even been finished, edited properly. So I decided to take it out because I think that it was probably going to cause more problems than was necessary. And it wasn't even needed in the film. It didn't really add anything. It was just the fact that we saw Capello's face. Well, he's gone now anyway. So
it's on. The film's being shown on the BBC imminently. How do you think it will be received?
Well, I hope. Obviously, I mean, all I can say is that this was the film I wanted to make, and this is the film that I would want to see myself. Whether other people agree with that is open to interpretation and up to them. But certainly, I don't think people get an opportunity to make a documentary within the corridors of football like this very regularly. So hopefully that and that alone will steer people towards it, and then they can make their own minds up about whether it's actually any good or not. But I think that as a documentary goes, that it's got that in its favour. It's also filmed over quite a long period of time, and that's quite an interesting story. I think when you see a story develop over such a long period of time, that's quite rare.
Good stuff. Well, listen, I wish you every success in the world. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd recommend it to anybody, even somebody who isn't necessarily a football fan, just to give them a little insight. So, as I say, I hope it goes really well. It deserves to. And thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks very much to you for watching, and we'll catch you soon.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.